Before we kick off, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that I currently occupy, and I let everyone else here pause to acknowledge the lands that you are free to currently live, work and thrive on. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders, both past and present and emerging, and any First Nations people here with us today. So today we're here to talk about self-care. So welcome to this monthly web series called On My Mind, presented by Support Act and American Express Music Backers. Today's workshop is going to be really immersive, so I'd like for everyone to feel like they can chat, ask questions, definitely jump on the chat window so that I can see anything that you want to explore. And we're going to kick off with a little bit of a deep dive into sort of what self-care is. So let me just click live. We're going to go live on Insta now. And just a little bit about me. So hello and welcome. My name is Ash King and I'm a provisional psychologist and mental health educator for Support Act. And as part of the On My Mind series, we explore issues to do with mental health, psychological wellness, talking about, you know, the darker side of mental health and human nature, but also the more positive sides too, exploring how you can use your strengths to create the life that you want and allow it to help you be a better artist and creator in the industry. So what should you expect from today's session? Well, we're going to talk about what is self-care and why it's even important. We're also going to do a little bit of something called a self-care assessment today. So a self-care assessment is going to help you explore your current self-care habits. And we're also going to explore something called the Bullseye, and that will help you see how balanced you are in regards to sort of your general self-care attitudes. So what we'll find out a little bit later in this session is that self-care doesn't only come in one variety, and we can separate it into elements. We want to see how balanced those elements are in your everyday life. We're also going to have a little bit of an exploration into our inward relationship. So that is how we feel about ourselves. And it's going to help us identify our needs and cultivate a little bit more self-respect. We're also going to talk about boundaries. Oh man, anyone who's ever been in a therapy room before or had a conversation with a psychologist or mental health practitioner will know that we are obsessed with boundaries. But today we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what they even are and why they're necessary. And finally, we're going to finish off this session with an exploration into your self-care non-negotiables. So what are the things that you need in your life to feel safe, stable, connected, and supported? So that's a little bit about what we're going to dive into today. Okay, so what is self-care and why should we make it a priority in our lives? So self-care refers to practices we undertake to reduce stress and overwhelm, restore our health and increase our well-being. So self-care might look different to everybody, but in a general sense, it might look like taking care of our physical body with exercise, sleep, and a good diet. Also checking in regularly with where our head is at, so how we're feeling mentally, and engaging in practices that provide an opportunity for deeper self-awareness. Self-care can also help us understand our emotional landscape, so how our feelings arise and also what we do when those feelings show up in terms of strategies to help us regulate those emotional experiences. Self-care is also, and this is kind of, I guess, the more common understanding of what self-care is making time for relaxation and rejuvenation, because we're not robots, we're not machines, we need to be able to take care of ourselves. And finally, self-care can also be about understanding what our relational needs are, communicating assertively, and setting boundaries. So why is self-care even important? Well, it enables us to be more present and connected in our relationships, which is something that we all want. And it also helps give us greater capacity to support other people too. It gives us more energy and focus to engage in things, particularly creative things that we love. And it allows us to cultivate respectful relationships with healthy boundaries. it also will help us manage conditions of anxiety and depression and a range of other mental health conditions. So self-care is a necessity and it's not a luxury. You know, there's a little bit of a misapprehension that sometimes self-care is a little bit self-absorbed and a bit selfish. But sort of what I've explored here already is that it actually helps us care about others more. It helps us give more of a shit for the people in our lives and the causes that are important to us too. Alrighty, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do something called a self-care assessment. Now, this is where you'll need to get your hands on the worksheet if you're joining me on our Zoom chat. Everyone on Instagram, you won't actually have access to this hard copy assessment, but I'll kind of take you through, so give you a little bit of an idea of what this self-care assessment looks like. So when it comes to self-care, there's no one size fits all. However, researchers have identified 4 areas of our life which require care and maintenance to sustain. So this assessment will help you recognize how self-care factors into your life currently, and if there's any areas that might be getting neglected and need a little bit more love. Okay, so what are these 4 areas of our life that we kind of need to take care of? So the first area is, and so anyone who's on our Zoom chat, I'll call to you guys now, jump onto your worksheet and start filling out this assessment for yourself. So feel free to do it. I'll be chatting away here, and then we'll come back to coming together and seeing how our results look. So the different aspects of our self-care routines can be broken down into these areas. The first one is physical self-care. It's kind of the one that we all generally know about. You know, if we ever go in for a doctor's checkup and the things that they ask us what we're doing, you know, are we eating healthy? Are we drinking enough water? Are we getting good quality sleep? Sort of we taking time to rest and recover if we fall ill? You know, all those kind of little bits and pieces, you know, physical, are we being physical? Are we moving our bodies? Are we getting exercise? So they all come down to physical self-care. Because when it comes to our mental health, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So our mental health and our physical health all work together in a holistic fashion. And so, you know, you can't just take care of one thing. When you do take care of your body, you'll find that your mental health generally improves too. So have a little think, you know, how is your physical self-care happening at the moment? You know, are you focusing on sleep? Are you getting, you know, healthy food? Are you nourishing yourself? Are you drinking a lot of water? Or maybe you're doing the stuff that's like a little bit down the other end. Are you drinking a lot of booze? Are you doing lots of drugs, staying up really late? You know, little things like that, which might kind of tip you down the other end of self-care. Right, so the next category is sort of our more sort of psychological or emotional self-care. And these are kind of when we want to have a sort of time out from our devices, from screens, maybe sort of write in a journal or do, you know, mindfulness activities, opportunities where we can kind of explore ourselves, understand ourselves a little bit better. You know, also learning to kind of say no when things are too much and we don't want to overwhelm ourselves, and take time to reflect on, you know, the things that you want, the things that drive you. Now, there's another aspect of self-care, which is our sort of relationship and our social self-care, because as human beings, we are social creatures. We've evolved to live and exist in communities. And there's a lot of data that's coming out now that says that people are reporting to be feeling even lonelier than they ever have before. And I'm sure that COVID has, you know, had an impact in this area, but also, you know, it's because sometimes we don't prioritize our social self-care. We don't make time to see people. We don't, you know, stay in touch with certain friends. We don't ask for help when we need it. You know, spend a quality time with our partner or our pets or our kids. You know, so all those little things really do make a difference when it comes to self-care. And then finally, we've got sort of our more professional sort of workplace self-care, as well as sort of growth and learning. It's kind of like education, study, and work. And these are all the things like, are we doing things that help us learn, help us grow? Are we taking on projects that are exciting and rewarding? Are we setting limits and boundaries in the workplace about what sort of work we will do and what sort of work we won't do? And is that, something that's fulfilling you? Because again, as human beings, we love to have this sense of mastery, of being able to work at something and to be able to improve in it too. So how's everyone going with your assessments? Is that all making sense? And are you all kind of getting a little bit of insight here too? Is there anyone who wants to share potentially some areas of self-care that they kind of don't even think about? Is your social self-care great, but maybe your sort of personal, emotional, psychological self-care not great? Maybe you don't spend a lot of time, just on your own, in stillness, reflecting, pausing. So Sophie on our Zoom chat here has brought up a really interesting point, which is, I feel that my use of alcohol is positive self-care sometimes and negative other times. So this is really interesting when it comes to substance use, because sometimes, sometimes it really is a way that people can unwind, switch off for the day, and sort of not be taken too far. I think, Sophie, that what happens in those types of situations is that those times when you kind of sit in some stillness and are able to start to recognize, certain types of feelings or urges that come up, when those feelings are leading you to make positive choices, or when they're leading you to maybe turn to alcohol because you're trying to, I guess, not confront something. Maybe you want to escape a type of feeling or escape a type of experience, in which case those situations maybe not so much, and they can be the more negative times for us. So Kim, very few threes for me. That's okay. That's why we're here. We're here to explore self-care and how you might be able to, I guess, level up in self-care in your life. And Isabella's said here, professional and work aspects as part of self-care, including setting boundaries and limits, are a valid factor that I hadn't considered. So of course, professional and work aspects are involved in your self-care routine. And I think that for a lot of us, it's an area that we don't really acknowledge. And Andrea says, I feel like I need to get outside more. And I'm totally with you on that, Andrea. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at something called the Bullseye. And so if you're joining us on Instagram, you won't be able to see this at the moment, but it's a graphic that looks, just like a bullseye you might see at a pub. And our bullseye is sliced up into 4 quarters. One is work and education, one is leisure, one is relationships, and the other is personal growth and health. And so this bullseye, I guess, helps us to visualize where we're sitting and how balanced we're sitting in terms of our behaviors of self-care. So if we're hitting right in the center of the bullseye, that means, great, I'm taking really good care of myself. If we're falling into the outer edges of our bullseye, it kind of means that you're neglecting yourself a little bit. So this bullseye activity allows us to get a quick visual of how balanced our self-care behaviors might be. To live with balance means considering all aspects of our lives. So relationships, work and study, health and growth, and our sort of psychological and emotional health, and leisure as well. So offering them all time, space, and consideration. We can fall out of balance from time to time, but finding these sustainable ways to nourish these different areas of our lives make it easier to keep up with our responsibilities, to avoid burnout, and live a rewarding life. So those of us who have the bullseye in front, all you have to do is add up all your scores out of 10. And if you're getting, I think it's out of 30, sorry. So if you're getting 30 out of 30, that means you're getting right in the bullseye for that. Anything less, you're kind of moving a little bit further away. Of course, this is not something that we need to take perfectionism into. We don't need to be perfect at self-care. This is just an opportunity for you to reflect on the different areas that you do take care of yourselves in, and some other areas that might help you support yourself a little bit more. So ask yourself, where do you sit? So now we're going to talk about something that is really key to understanding self-care and why we look after ourselves in the first place. And this comes down to something called self-RESPECT. Aretha would have sung this version if it was available to her now, I'm sure. But we're talking about self-respect. So when it comes to self-respect, we usually accept that in order to have good relationships with other people, we need to make time for them, right? We need to listen to them, respect them, and let them know that they matter to us. But how often do we do these things for ourselves? Our inward relationship, so our relationship with ourselves, like any other relationship in our life, is something that needs care, time, consideration, and maintenance. Many of us have actually got quite toxic relationships with ourselves. So our self-talk is loaded with cruelty and criticism. You're pathetic. You're lazy. You can't do anything right. You'll never have a great life. You'll always be messed up. You know, some of us have these messages playing to ourselves on repeat. Can you imagine if we were in a relationship where the other person was telling us this all the time? And we routinely neglect healthy and supportive behaviors, and we force ourselves into doing things that violate our boundaries and don't respect our own needs. If you were in this type of relationship with another person, would this type of behavior towards you lead you to respect them? So this is how that nature of self-respect can be tricky, because we have to treat ourselves like we would treat another person that we do respect, that we care about, that we give a shit about. And so often we actually have quite toxic relationships with ourselves, and we don't treat ourselves like someone that we love and respect. So how can we start to shift this dynamic, this relationship that we have with ourselves? How can we acknowledge, okay, well, yes, maybe I do want to have a healthier relationship with who I am, and I want to learn to respect myself more. And if we were sitting in a therapy room, I think that we would start to talk about needs and boundaries. Okay, so what are our needs? Our needs are the things that help support and sustain us, particularly when we are feeling low, overwhelmed, or depleted. So not always, we don't always have to be feeling low, overwhelmed, and depleted. But, we also have needs of joy, of lightness, of happiness, of fun, of play, of curiosity. But we also have our share of needs when we are feeling low and when we are feeling overwhelmed. So when certain big emotions come up for us, we can learn to identify these and then better understand what we might need in the moment to support ourselves. So what I mean by this is that a lot of us, all of us actually, as we're human beings, have experiences with emotion. Something happens, we get rejected or we get let down and we feel disappointment. Maybe we feel guilty. Maybe we feel ashamed. And we kind of understand the labels of these emotions in, I guess, a cognitive sense. But what is really valuable for us to learn is how we can understand these feelings in a lived sense. The feeling of disappointment for me inside my body is not going to be the same way that you feel and experience disappointment. All of our feelings have, they're almost like songs. They have different elements to them. They have different tempos and timbres. They have, different volumes. And sometimes, your anxiety might be feeling really loud, and other times you might have maybe the type of stress that's kind of quite quiet but nagging and nonstop. So there is practices that we can do to help start us on the road to identifying what these feelings are, as opposed to just going, I just want to get rid of them. I just want to get rid of them straight away. Because when we understand what these feelings are and how they show up in our bodies, we can then go, okay, I'm getting a sign that I'm feeling some anxiety. I'm starting to notice that I'm feeling stressed. So what is it that I need in this moment to support myself? So for example, when we're feeling stressed, we might need to take some time out. Maybe that's taking a walk outside, getting some deep belly breaths. Maybe it's sitting down and eating lunch. So there's little things that we might need, and everyone might need something different. Maybe when you're feeling stressed, you need to call up a mate and have a vent. Maybe when you're feeling stressed, you need to put some time out to commit to one project to get something done. So we all have different needs when we're feeling stressed, and obviously contexts can also help dictate what our needs might be within that situation too. Okay, so then where do boundaries come in? So boundaries are the guidelines that we set in place that indicate what type of treatment that we will and will not accept from others. Boundaries help make our needs clear to other people, and they help us acknowledge that they're important, so that our needs are important and that they deserve to be met. Healthy boundaries are flexible. They allow us to conserve emotional energy, and they improve our relationships with ourselves and sort of enhance our self-worth. So have a little bit of a think. Are there any boundaries? Are there any times where you thought that maybe you could have used some boundaries in your life? We're going to do a little bit of an exercise in just a moment to explore this a bit more. But hopefully this is all making sense. Needs and boundaries, they're important. We all have them. We might not have boundaries at the moment, but hopefully at the end of this session, you might be able to understand what a few of your boundaries need to be. If you've got any questions, feel free to chuck them in the comments or the chat, and I'll get back to you. Let's keep going. Okay, so boundaries. We can set boundaries for a number of different things. And these are personal space, who we let occupy our personal space. Sexuality, things like sexuality, who we are going to entertain as a sexual partner, how we want to express our sexuality, and how we are going to, receive other people expressing theirs. We can have boundaries for emotions and thoughts, and we can also have boundaries for conversations and discussions. Maybe there's things that you don't want to talk about with certain people. And I know that I've got, a few clients who would be like, okay, well, I'm never having these types of discussions at family dinner because I just find that I get really angry and that it makes me really hostile towards my family and that I really don't enjoy myself. So that's an instance where you might have some boundaries around conversations and discussions. For behavior, the way that other people are acting, maybe you throw regular dinner parties and you always have that mate who just cancels at the last minute. It's like really crappy. And maybe one of your boundaries is, well, actually, I go out of my way to sort this dinner out and to cook and plan and organize, and you just never show up. And so that's actually a real violation of, my time and effort. And maybe that's a boundary that, dictates how other people are acting towards you. We can have boundaries for our stuff and possessions. Maybe there's people that you don't want to lend your drum kit to. You're like, yeah, maybe not you, I don't know if it'll come back in the right condition. We can also set boundaries for time and energy. And this one's also really important, particularly when it comes to work. Often we don't have boundaries that surround our time and energy in the workplace. We find that it's 2 a.m. and we've been sitting behind our computer for the last 12 hours and we have worked nonstop. And work life. So that kind of feeds into our time and energy too. So how can we set boundaries at work with our colleagues, how can our managers understand what our boundaries are? And we can also set boundaries for culture, religion, and ethics. And if you have existed on the internet at all at any point in time, then you may also be familiar with why you might want to place some boundaries in those areas too. All right, so let's take a little bit more of a deep dive into our boundaries. How do we know which boundaries to set? How do we know when boundaries might be necessary? All right, so we're going to do a little activity now. So hopefully you're somewhere where you can sit down, where it's relatively quiet and private, where you might be able to either close down your eyes or just take up some space just for yourself. We're going to do a little guided visualization here, and I'm going to ask you to recall a time in the past where you feel like your boundaries might have been violated. So this might have been you not honoring your own boundaries, potentially by overworking, by overindulging, by saying yes when you wanted to say no, or maybe someone else doing something that didn't sit quite right with you. So maybe someone talking down to you, maybe someone said something offensive in conversation that just didn't feel right. Maybe someone made an unfair demand of you. So I want you to have a little bit of a think. So finding yourself a comfortable position, just rolling your shoulders back and rolling your neck out a little bit. Maybe finding somewhere where your back is supported. You can be either sitting on the floor, maybe sitting on a chair or on a sofa somewhere. And we're just going to close down the eyes or just take your gaze down somewhere nice and soft and gentle just in front of you. We're going to start off by drawing our awareness to our breath. And don't feel the need to change how you're breathing. Don't feel the need to make it anything different. Just notice how the breath interacts with your body. So you might feel your breath coming in through your nostrils, the air being quite cool. And then as you breathe out, you might feel that the air is a little bit warmer. Maybe you feel your breath in your chest. You can feel as your lungs expand and as they drop. Or maybe you can feel the breath most in your stomach or your diaphragm. And you can feel as your belly rises on the inhale and falls on the exhale. So just allow your focus to sit with your breath for a little bit. So now I'm going to ask you to think back, maybe sometime in the last month, where you feel like there might have been an opportunity for you to have boundaries on some area of your life, but you didn't. Maybe it's to do with relationships. Maybe it's to do with work. Maybe it's to do with your own behavior. You can think back to the self-care assessment here too. Think about maybe some areas that have pulled you away from your needs. Some areas or experiences that have made you less connected with yourself, taken you away from that sense of self-respect and self-care. I want you to now imagine this scenario, this situation, this experience of when your boundaries were violated. Put yourself back in that moment. Can you see who is around you? Maybe your location. Now, I'd like for you to pay attention to what feelings come up in your body when recalling this experience. Is there some kind of discomfort or tension that arises in your body? Can you give these feelings a name? Do you feel anger? And how does that anger manifest? Is your anger hot? Is it moving? Is it noisy? If your anger had a shape or a form, what might it look like? Maybe you're having feelings more of anxiety or more of overwhelm and stress, in which case I ask the same thing. How does stress feel in your body? Does it feel tight? Does it feel heavy or does it feel light? Does it feel like it's moving or does it feel like it's still? If your stress took a form, would it be fluid? Would it be solid? Would it be sticky or spiky or smooth? This is quite a unique way of looking at our feelings and understanding our feelings and reflecting on our feeling experience. But it can be really valuable to help us understand what certain feelings, what states they take within our body. So looking back at this experience and feeling back into this experience, I would like for you to then reflect on what the consequence was of these boundaries being violated in the past. You know, maybe you doing something or maybe someone else doing something that didn't sit right with you, that weren't in line with what you need, that weren't in line with what you want for yourself. What happened? You know, maybe if it was to do with work, you said yes when maybe you should have said no because you don't have the time or the energy. If you took on too much, did you then lead yourself to become even more overwhelmed? And so how did you behave as a result of this? What did you do afterwards and how did you feel? And now just allowing yourself to return to being aware of your breath here. So allowing that visualization to sort of fade. And together we're going to take 3 nice deep breaths, breathing in through the nose. Pause and breathing out. 3, 2, 1. Breathing in, filling the lungs. Pause and exhale. 3, 2, 1. And one last time, breathing in and pause. Exhale. 3, 2, 1. And just feeling your physical body up against your chair, maybe feeling your feet in your shoes or pressing into the ground. Giving yourself a little bit of a stretch, rolling your shoulders. And when you're ready, you can open up your eyes. Anyone who's joining us on the chat or in the comments, feel free to share if anything came up for you and what was interesting and maybe what you learned through that process. This was something that was really helpful for me in my journey to understand how important boundaries were. And in particular, in my lived experience, I found that I did not have enough boundaries around my relationships. So as a bit of a chronic people pleaser, I just wanted everyone to like me all the time. I just wanted everyone to approve of me and everyone to think that I was a really good person. So I never did anything that I thought might, piss someone off or disappoint someone, which kind of sounds really great in theory, but it also means that a lot of the time I put my own needs last. So I sidelined everything that maybe I wanted and that I needed from situations and relationships, and I sort of prioritized everything else, which after a while becomes really draining, and it starts to chip away at that sense of our own self-worth. Just like we were exploring earlier, you know, that sense of self-respect. How would you respect someone else who never ever respected what you wanted? And so you have to be that person for yourself. You have to respect what your needs and your wants are, and understand that, yes, you know, other people's needs are important too, but also so are yours. And you should be able to give them priority without feeling guilty and without feeling shame. Thanks, Nicole. We're exploring boundaries here and needs. And we all have had experiences. I'm sure that you have had experiences with these too. All right, so our last activity that we're going to dive into today is something called your self-care non-negotiables. Now, these might not be something that you know straight away what they are, but they're going to be something that hopefully you're going to be able to take away with you after this session's over and think about. You know, wonder, what are the things that you need, that you really need in your everyday life to ensure that your needs are met, that you feel safe and supported, that you feel connected in your relationships, and that you can take care of yourself properly. So our self-care practices are often the first things to fall away when things get overwhelming. However, these practices have a protective quality where they can help us build our resilience and make us more robust in the face of obstacles and challenges. Tell me the last time that you got really stressed and really overwhelmed and had heaps on your plate, and I will bet you $50 that the first things that you stopped doing were all the things that help you take care of yourself. So you might have stopped exercise or going to the gym. I don't have time for that. You might have stopped sleeping. You know, oh, I have to stay up late. Oh, I better get up really, really early in the morning. Oh, I don't have time to eat properly. So you kind of skipped millions of meals, or you're just eating junk food. You stopped drinking water, or maybe you started drinking heaps of booze. So a lot of the things that we go to when our life seems pretty stressful are certain types of strategies and behaviors that may have supported us in the past, or that may support us well in the short term, but might not necessarily help us in the long term. So we need to think about maybe the things that fall away that are positive self-care behaviors. So I'm going to ask you, everyone who's joining us on the chat, to grab your workbook again and have a little bit of a think about what your top 5 self-care non-negotiables are. So these may be informed by the assessments that we did earlier. They may be informed by the guided visualization that we just did before, when something came up for you and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, like there was a boundary there that was violated. So is there a need that I have in that regard, and how can I meet that need? And what do I need in my life to meet that need when it shows up? So, I mean, this is very broad. It's going to be different for everyone. But for instance, one of my top 5 self-care non-negotiables, which I think I'm going to share with the rest of the human race, is sleep. I cannot operate without adequate sleep, and I usually need 8 hours. Now, that's easier said than done, especially because I now have a 5-month-old baby. And you know what? Babies do not respect your self-care needs, and that's quite toxic of them. But no, you know, in all seriousness, I have recognized how important sleep is for me when I've found that it's been removed from my life and I'm not getting as quality sleep as before. When you go to see a therapist, they'll often ask you about your sleep habits. You know, our sleep habits are deeply entwined with our mental well-being and our physical well-being. Some people don't need as much sleep as other people, and that's fine too. But, you know, that would be one of my my top 5 self-care non-negotiables. Does anyone have any self-care non-negotiables that you'd like to share? Jump in the chat or jump in the comments and let me know. What are the things that you need to help yourself live, thrive, and survive? What do you need in your life? I think another one for me personally would be, times with my friends and family, times with people who are close to me, and kind of not just, you know, faffing about, but times when I'm actually engaged in real conversation, when I get to sit down and listen to them deeply, and when I get to sit down and, communicate, share what's going on for me. So Miranda has shared time to create art, music, etc. Absolutely. Creativity is a hugely important aspect for many of us. And, unfortunately in our society, it tends to almost get squeezed out of us as we get older. Kids are so beautiful and creative, and they see the world in such amazing creative ways. I've got Catfish here on our Insta Live saying time alone to recharge. Oh my God, amen. Absolutely. Time alone can be critical, particularly if, you're also more of an introvert, and it can feel quite draining for you to spend a lot of time around people. So, again, we have different personalities, which means that we have different needs, which means that we might need to have different types of self-care, non-negotiables. Andrea's also sharing sort of part-time job, not contacting me on days I don't work. Yes, so this comes down to our boundaries as well. When you're working great, but on the days that you're not, have that space be sacred for you on whatever you need to do in that time. When you're not working, you're not on the clock. And so, yes, you might need to place some boundaries there. And that is an act of genuine self-care, to be like, actually, let your boss know, let your manager know, hey, I can't really talk about work today. I can't really do work stuff today because this is my time to be with my family, to be with my friends, to be with myself. And I really need that time in order to show up for the rest of my life, and for the other relationships that I've got, and for the work that I have to do when I'm at work. Isabella said, I need to be able to sit down and enjoy a mindful meal from start to finish. I find this is good because eating is non-avoidable and can always be reliable to follow through with. Absolutely beautiful, Isabella. That's so wonderfully put, because yes, we do need to eat and nourish our bodies. And a lot of the time we just kind of can stuff food in our face. We don't even remember what we've eaten, like 5 minutes later. So being able to sit down and making, eating a meal a mindful process is a really beautiful way to take care of yourself. Not only are you taking care of some of your physical needs by eating, but you're also taking care of some of those sort of more emotional, psychological self-care needs, being mindful, being present with what's happening in the moment, not getting dragged off thinking about things that have happened, or dragged off thinking about things that you need to do. So I think that's a really beautiful and important one. I've got links here on Insta saying being able to say no and not taking on too many projects at once. Beauty. And that's something that we've explored a little bit today in today's session, because sometimes being able to say no can be a challenge for us. And that might be something that you need in your self-care repertoire when you realize, oh, wow, I find it hard to say no. So I say yes to everyone, and then I take on way too much, and then I end up disappointing myself, disappointing other people, and becoming disappointed overall, or becoming burnt out and overwhelmed. And that's not great for anyone. And you can't do anything. So being able to say no is really, really critical, and a wonderful and brave act of self-care. Andrea's also shared, I have to have time out every day to read a book. And I love this too. Reading is something that's beautiful and nourishing, can help inspire our creativity or our learning and growth, depending on what you like to read. What's everyone reading at the moment? What books have you got on rotation? I'd love to hear. I'm always a big fan of people's fave books and what they're reading. I'm going to share a couple as well, just coming up, in case you want to learn a little bit more or work a little bit more on the stuff that we're talking about today. The Busking Bassist has also shared, how good is Support Act though? Let's take a sec to thank the best charity for the music industry. Absolutely. We love Support Act, and Support Act are doing so many amazing and wonderful things for all the people in the music and arts industries. So we're going to finish up with a couple of really beautiful quotes about self-care and boundaries. And this one is from Kristen Neff, who's a researcher, and she's an expert in self-compassion research. She says, I found in my research that the biggest reason people aren't more self-compassionate is that they are afraid they'll become self-indulgent. They believe self-criticism is what keeps them in line. Most people have gotten it wrong because our culture says being hard on yourself is the way to be. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but it 100% resonates with me, because you think that being nasty to yourself helps you do things. But a lot of the time, it really just starts to chip away at that relationship that we have with ourselves. Another beautiful quote: rest and self-care are so important. When you take time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve others from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. And this is a quote by Eleanor Brown, and a reminder that actually, when we do take care of our own needs, when we set those boundaries and we engage in those really supportive and nourishing self-care behaviors, we suddenly have a lot more of ourselves to be able to give and offer to the world, whether that's in a creative capacity, creating art and music and thinking up new amazing ideas, or whether that's, time and energy spent with your family, with your kids, with your partner, with your pet, with your mum and dad, with your friends. So we tend to think that, self-care, very self-centered, very self-focused, but these self-care behaviors are what allow us to expand our reach and our support for people around us, and are able to allow us to sort of grow into these amazing sort of creative and driven people that we want to be. So if you want to keep learning in this area and you're quite interested in the idea of boundaries and sort of nourishing that inward relationship and really working on self-respect, then these are a couple of books that I have read and loved. Rising Strong by Brene Brown. I'm not sure if you've heard Brene Brown, but she's a big rock star in the counseling and mental health space. And she is a social worker and a researcher, and she talks really well about vulnerability and the power of connection, as well as the importance of boundaries. So you can give that book a read. I really recommend it. But if you don't have time to read her book, I would jump on YouTube and check out her TED Talk, which is one of the most streamed TED Talks of all time. And it's got some really beautiful insights in there. There's also The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up by Mark Manson. He's had a really interesting life, and I think that his experience of life might resonate with a lot of people in the arts industries. He used to tour a lot. He used to have this quite chaotic life of going out and partying, and he was a blogger, but a lot of the stuff that he did, he put out into the world, and so he was always kind of under, I guess, the public eye. And he learned a lot about himself going through this. And he went through a couple of really heavy experiences. So that book might be quite interesting for you if his experience might resonate too. And there's also Emily and Amelia Nagoski's book, Burnout. If you feel like self-care has absolutely not had a seat in the table in your life, and you feel yourself completely drained, completely uninspired, everything is an effort, and you kind of find it hard to give a shit about anything, then reading this book will be really useful because it explores what burnout is. I've got links saying Mark Manson's book is sitting on my coffee table at the moment. Awesome stuff. And Andrea has also mentioned I'm reading Kerry Greenwood, a Corinna Chapman series novel. Love the reading. I'm reading a very interesting book at the moment called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, which is very fascinating. And I think that reading is definitely part of my self-care schedule. And I'm glad to see that it's something that a lot of other people connect with too. So this kind of brings us to the end of our On My Mind series about self-care for the 21st century. Thank you so much for everyone who's joined us either on Instagram Live or via our Zoom. Thank you for everyone who has shared something in the comments or chat. I should remind you all that supportact.org.au is an incredible organisation that exists to support you, anyone working in the music industry within Australia. So you can give them a call at any time, or you can give them a call on their wellbeing helpline. The number is 1-800-959-500, and you can chat to someone sort of anytime about stuff that you're going through, feeling challenged, sort of is your mental health not feeling great, are you struggling with relationships, or even struggling with kind of financial or sort of professional stuff. Give them a bit of a call. You can apply for grants, you can get crisis relief, and you can learn a little bit more about how to help a mate who's maybe not doing great. So definitely jump onto their website and take advantage of their resources. They're really, really fabulous. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined me today. I am absolutely so grateful to have shared this space for you. And Isabella and Miranda, bless you. Thank you so much. Miranda from Musicians Making a Difference. I think that all musicians everywhere make a difference. I'm married to one, and I was one for about 10 years. And you know what? In my heart of hearts, I still consider myself a musician at heart, even if I don't work in the industry full time anymore. Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you so much to everyone there on Instagram who's come on this ride with us. We will be having another On My Mind session next month. It's 1 hour, it's free. So make sure you keep an eye on Support Act socials so that you can find out when it's all happening. My name is Ash King, a provisional psychologist with the Indigo Project and mental health educator with Support Act. It's been an absolute vibe, and I can't wait to see you guys sometime real soon.